The Alpha King bought me for 40 silver pieces. He thinks I'm just another broken slave. He doesn't know I'm the daughter of the rival pack he slaughtered. He doesn't know I've spent 3 years training to end him. Tonight, he'll sleep beside me. Tomorrow, he'll wake up dead. There's only one problem. I woke up first, and I can't remember why I wanted him gone. Let's begin. The world had ended 3 days ago. Alina stood at the back of the crowded slave wagon, her wrists bound with rough rope that had already chafed her skin raw. The wooden wheels creaked and groaned as the wagon lurched along the cobblestone road leading to the royal palace of Valthera. Around her, a dozen other souls huddled in various states of despair, some weeping quietly, others staring with hollow, vacant eyes. But Alina's eyes were dry. She had no tears left. 3 days. It had been 3 days since she had held Ethan's hand as the life faded from his eyes. 3 days since the fever had stolen him, stolen her mate, stolen her future. She could still feel the phantom warmth of his fingers, still hear the ragged whisper of his last words. "I'm sorry, Alina. I'm sorry I couldn't." She had pressed her forehead to his, willing him to stay, begging the moon goddess to take her instead. But the goddess was cruel, and Ethan was gone. What came after was a blur of pain and humiliation. Ethan's mother, Lady Isildora, had never approved of their union. Alina was a commoner, a girl from a small village with no lineage, no status, no dowry. She was unworthy of her son, and Isildora had made sure she knew it every single day. With Ethan buried, the mask of cold disapproval had slipped away entirely, revealing something far uglier beneath. "You were never his true mate," Isildora hissed, standing over Alina as she knelt beside the fresh grave. "It was a trick of fate, a mistake, and now that my son is gone, I will correct that mistake." Alina looked up, her heart already shattered into pieces too small to ever be put back together. What do you mean?" "You are a burden, a stain on this family's honor." Isildora's lips curled into a thin, cruel smile. "But you have one remaining use." And so here she was, sold, like livestock. For a handful of silver coins, Lady Isildora had signed a contract with a royal slaver, erasing Alina's existence with the flick of her wrist. The former lady of a minor noble house was now property of the crown. The wagon lurched to a halt. Rough hands grabbed Alina by the arm and hauled her out into the blinding sunlight. She stumbled, her bare feet landing on cold, polished stone. "Line up, don't dawdle," a gruff voice barked. Alina blinked, her eyes adjusting to the light. Before her rose the palace of Valthera, a monstrous structure of white marble and glittering spires that seemed to pierce the very clouds. It was beautiful, it was terrifying, it was her prison. She shuffled forward with the others, a line of broken souls being herded towards a side entrance. Servants and guards bustled past, their eyes sliding over the slaves as if they were invisible. To them, I suppose, they were. Through corridors and down narrow staircases, they were led, descending into the bowels of the great house, where the machinery of the great house churned in darkness. The smell of food, smoke, and sweat grew stronger. The kitchens. "New batch," the slaver announced to a formidable woman with flour-dusted hands and a face like clenched fist, the head cook. The head cook's sharp eyes scanned them, assessing. "This one," she pointed to a strong-looking man, "scullery. These two," she gestured to a pair of frightened young girls, "vegetable prep. You," her gaze landed on Alina. Alina met her eyes. She didn't flinch, she didn't beg. The head cook raised an eyebrow, a flicker of something, surprise, respect, crossing her face before vanishing. "Laundry, you look like you have a spine. The laundry mistress will beat it out of you by sundown." A guard grabbed Alina's arm and pulled her from the line, leading her deeper into the servants' quarters. The air grew thick with steam and the sharp, acrid scent of lye. The sound of sloshing water and the rhythmic thump of paddles against wet fabric filled her ears. The laundry was hell, a vast, steamy cavern where women worked in silence, their faces blank, their hands red and raw. Alina was given a pile of sodden linens and a brush and told to scrub. She scrubbed until her knuckles bled. She was nothing now, a ghost, a pair of hands that existed only to clean the filth of others. The Alina who had laughed, who had loved, who had dreamed of a cottage and children with Ethan, that Alina was dead. She worked through the afternoon and into the evening, her body aching, her mind mercifully numb. The other slaves ignored her. They had learned long ago not to make friends. Friends could be sold away. Friends could die. Friends were a weakness you couldn't afford. As dusk began to fall, a frantic whisper rippled through the laundry. "He's coming! The Alpha King is coming!" Panic erupted. The head laundress, a terrifying woman with a wooden paddle, began screaming orders. "You, pick up those sheets. You, straighten that pile. Move, you worthless slugs. If one thing is out of place, I'll have you all flogged." Alina barely registered the chaos. She continued to scrub, her motions mechanical. What did she care about some king? Kings didn't come to laundries. They didn't see people like her. But then the heavy oak door to the laundry was thrown open with a resounding bang, and a wave of frigid, authoritative energy washed into the room, cutting through the oppressive heat like a blade of ice. The chattering stopped, the scrubbing stopped, even the steam seemed to hold its breath. The Alpha King of Valthera stood in the doorway. He was tall, taller than any man Alina had ever seen, with broad shoulders that strained the rich fabric of his dark tunic and leather breeches meant for riding, not for court. His hair was the color of a raven's wing, and his eyes were the color of molten silver, fierce and unyielding. He was handsome in a way that was almost painful to look at, a face carved from legend and power. Behind him, a flustered-looking servant was wringing his hands. "Your Majesty, please, the throne room is this way. The visiting dignitaries are waiting." "I know the way to my own throne room," the king's voice rumbled, low and commanding. It silenced the servant instantly. His gaze swept across the laundry, not with disgust, but with a sharp, assessing focus that missed nothing. He was looking for someone, or something. Alina's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't his power that made her freeze. It wasn't his beauty or the aura of command that surrounded him like a physical force. It was the sudden, searing pain in her chest. It was a phantom pain, an echo of the wound that had torn her soul apart 3 days ago, the mate bond, the broken, shredded remnant that still lived within her. It convulsed, twisted, and then it went silent. As if it had been usurped, as if a stronger, more dominant force had simply reached out and snuffed it out. The Alpha King's head snapped toward her, his molten silver eyes widening. He stopped dead in his tracks. The room held its breath. Every slave, every laundress, every guard stared. The king's gaze was fixed on one single point, on her. Alina couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. She was just a slave girl in a ragged dress, her hair a mess, her hands covered in soap and blood. She was nothing, invisible. But the Alpha King saw her, and in his eyes she saw the same shock, the same impossible recognition that was tearing through her own chest. His jaw tightened, his hands hanging at his sides curled into fists. He took one step toward her, one step. And then a high-ranking official appeared at the door, breathless. "Your Majesty, the ambassador from the northern clans refuses to wait any longer. He's threatening to leave." The king stopped. He didn't take his eyes off Alina. The tension in the room was a living thing, a coiled serpent ready to strike. For a long, agonizing moment, he simply stared at Alina. Then his gaze flickered, just for an instant, to the faded bruise on her cheek, left there by Lady Isildora's guards when they had dragged her from her home. A muscle feathered in his jaw, a low, almost inaudible growl rumbled in his chest. Then, as if a spell had been broken, he turned on his heel and strode from the laundry without a backward glance, the official scrambling after him. The door slammed shut. The steam returned. The sounds of the laundry resumed. The head laundress started screaming again, but Alina didn't hear any of it.
She stood frozen, the scrub brush falling from her numb fingers into the soapy water with a soft plop. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The pain of her broken bond with Ethan was gone, vanished, replaced by a terrifying, overwhelming emptiness. And in the space where her mate had once lived in her soul, there was now the searing, undeniable imprint of another, the Alpha King. He had felt it too, she had seen it in his eyes. She had been sold to be a palace slave, but in that single, frozen moment, something had shifted, something irrevocable, something dangerous. The Alpha King had seen her, and the moon goddess, it seemed, was not done with Alina yet.
The laundry became a blur of terror after that. Alina scrubbed until her fingers were raw, then kept scrubbing. She didn't dare look up. She didn't dare think about the silver eyes that had pierced through her like a blade. She focused on the linen in her hands, on the sting of lye in her cracked skin, on the ache in her knees from kneeling on stone. But her wolf, that small, battered thing that had been curled in a corner of her soul since Ethan's death, was no longer silent. It was pacing, whining, scratching at the walls of her consciousness with desperate, frantic claws. Mate, it keened. Mate is near. Why are we not with Mate? He is not our mate, Alina told it firmly, even as her own heart betrayed her with every erratic beat. Our mate is dead. This is a trick, a mistake. But her wolf would not be silenced. It had felt the Alpha King's presence, had tasted the power of his wolf through that brief electric connection, and it would not forget. The other slaves noticed nothing. They were too consumed by their own exhaustion, their own quiet desperation. But the head laundress, Mistress Gretchen, had sharp eyes. "You," she snapped, appearing at Alina's elbow like a vengeful spirit. "The king looked at you." Alina's blood turned to ice. I don't know why, mistress." Gretchen's eyes narrowed. She was a thick woman with arms like hams and a temper that had earned her the nickname the Crusher among the younger slaves. "Don't lie to me, girl. Everyone saw it. The Alpha King never looks at slaves. Never." She leaned closer, and Alina could smell the sour ale on her breath. "What are you? Who were you before?" "No one," Alina whispered. It was the truth. She was no one now. Just a village girl. My mate died. His mother sold me. Something flickered in Gretchen's eyes, not pity exactly, but a grudging recognition of a familiar pain. She had likely seen 100 broken girls pass through her laundry, but she straightened, her expression hardening once more. "Then you'll work like a village girl, and you'll stay away from the upper floors. The king doesn't come to the servants' quarters. He won't see you again. That moment is over. Do you understand?" Alina nodded, relief and something almost like disappointment warring in her chest. "Yes, mistress." "Good." Gretchen turned away, then paused. "And girl, if any guard comes asking about you, you tell them nothing. Nothing. The palace has ears in every wall, and tongues are cheap. Yours will be cheaper if you're not careful." She disappeared into the steam, leaving Alina alone with the churning in her gut and the frantic pacing of her wolf. 3 weeks passed in the laundry. 3 weeks of steam and lye and raw, bleeding knuckles. 3 weeks of sleeping on a thin pallet and eating watery gruel that barely sustained her. 3 weeks of waiting for something to happen, for the king to appear again, for Chaol to return, for her world to shatter or transform. Nothing happened. The king did not come to the laundry. Chaol did not summon her. The silver-eyed wolf who had frozen her soul with a single glance might as well have been a dream. Alina began to convince herself that she had imagined it all. The bond, the recognition, the impossible pull. It had been a trick of grief, a hallucination born of exhaustion and despair. She was just a slave. He was the Alpha King. The moon goddess was cruel, but even she would not torment Alina with a mate she could never have. Her wolf disagreed. It whined and paced and scratched at her consciousness every moment of every day, refusing to accept that their mate had abandoned them. But Alina learned to ignore it, the way she had learned to ignore the ache in her belly and the hunger in her belly. She worked. She survived. She became invisible. And then, on the 22nd day, everything changed. It started with a rumor. The slaves whispered about it in the laundry, their voices low and excited, the most animation Alina had seen from them since her arrival. The Alpha King is taking a mate. A Luna after all these years. They say it's Lady Serena from the Western Province. Beautiful, noble, perfect for him. Alina's scrub brush paused mid-stroke. Her heart, traitor that it was, clenched painfully in her chest. A mate. He's taking a mate. Of course he was. He was the Alpha King. He needed an heir, a Luna to stand by his side. He wouldn't choose a slave girl with broken hands and a dead mate's ghost in her eyes. He would choose someone worthy, someone like Lady Serena. Her wolf howled in denial, but Alina shoved it down. She had known this was coming. She had known the moment in the laundry was nothing, a flicker, a mistake. She resumed scrubbing, her movements mechanical, her face blank. The other slaves continued their excited chatter, oblivious to the quiet death happening in Alina's chest. That evening, as the slaves lined up for their meager supper, a palace guard appeared at the door of the dining hall. "Alina, laundry slave, come with me." Every head turned, every eye fixed on her. Alina's stomach dropped to her feet. Mistress Gretchen stepped forward, her expression wary. "What's this about? She's doing the laundry in an hour." The guard barely glanced at her. "Orders from above. She's being reassigned." "Reassigned where?" "None of your concern." The guard grabbed Alina's arm, his grip bruising. "Move." Alina stumbled after him, her heart pounding. Reassigned? That could mean anything. A better position, a worse one, or simply a quiet place to dispose of a problem slave. The palace had dungeons beneath dungeons, she had heard. Places where slaves went and never returned. They walked through corridors she didn't recognize, past guards who stared straight ahead, through doors that opened silently at their approach. Deeper and deeper into the palace they went, until Alina had completely lost her bearings. Finally, they stopped before an ornate door carved with wolves and moons. The guard knocked once, then pushed it open. "Inside." Alina stepped through the doorway and froze. She was in a sitting room, elegant and warm, with a crackling fire and furniture upholstered in soft velvet. And standing by the fire, his silver eyes gleaming in the firelight, was Chaol. "Sit down, Alina. We need to talk." She sat because her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. Chaol poured her a cup of tea. Tea, something she hadn't tasted in weeks, and pressed it into her trembling hands. "You've heard the rumors." It wasn't a question. "About the king taking a mate." Alina's voice came out flat, hollow. "Yes, I heard." Chaol studied her for a long moment. "And what did you feel when you heard?" Alina looked down at the tea, watching the steam rise. "Nothing. I felt nothing, because it doesn't matter. I'm a slave. He's the king. Whatever happened in the laundry was a mistake." It was not a mistake. The words were spoken with such quiet certainty that Alina looked up despite herself. Chaol's ancient eyes held hers, and for the first time, she saw something like compassion in their depths. "The bond you felt is real, Alina.
The king feels it too. He has felt it every moment of every day for the past 3 weeks. He has not come to you because he's trying to protect you. Protect me? Alina laughed, a bitter, broken sound. By letting me rot in the laundry? By announcing he's taking another mate? The announcement is a trap. The words hung in the air between them. Alina stared at Kale, uncomprehending. A trap? Kale set down his own cup and leaned forward. The king has enemies, powerful enemies, who would love nothing more than to find a weakness they could exploit. A secret mate, a slave girl with no family, no protection, would be the perfect target. His voice dropped lower. If they knew about you, they would kill you, slowly, painfully, just to hurt him. Alina's blood turned to ice. So he's been keeping me hidden, pretending I don't exist. Exactly. The announcement about Lady Serena is a lie. There is no mate. There never will be. Not while you live. Kale paused. But the announcement serves a purpose. It will draw out his enemies, make them show their hands, and while they're focused on the false Luna, the real one will be safe. The real one. He meant her, Alina, the slave girl, the real Luna. It was insane. It was impossible. And yet, looking into Kale's steady eyes, Alina knew it was the truth. Why are you telling me this? If I'm supposed to be hidden, why bring me here? Kale's expression grew grim. Because the plan has changed. Lady Isadora. Alina's heart stopped. What about her? She arrived at the palace this morning. She requested an audience with the king, claiming she has urgent information about a threat to the crown. Kale's jaw tightened. The king granted her audience. He wanted to see for himself the woman who hurt you. Alina's tea sloshed over the rim of her cup, hot liquid burning her fingers. She didn't feel it. She's here? She's here, and she's dangerous. Kale rose, moving to a small desk in the corner. He returned with a rolled parchment. This is what she brought the king, a letter supposedly written by you, confessing to a plot to assassinate him. Alina stared at the parchment, her mind reeling. I never wrote that. I can barely write my own name. We know. The handwriting is a crude forgery, and the content is ridiculous. But that's not the point. Kale's eyes were hard. The point is that Lady Isadora is connected. She has allies among the king's enemies, and she's identified you as a threat. A threat? Alina laughed wildly. I'm a slave girl. I'm nothing. You are his mate, and she knows it. Kale sat down across from her again. We don't know how she found out. Perhaps she has spies in the palace. Perhaps she simply guessed when she heard a slave girl had caught the king's attention. But she knows, Alina, and she's made her move. The fire crackled in the silence. Alina's mind raced, trying to process the avalanche of information. What happens now? She finally whispered. Kale met her eyes. Now the king has a choice. He can deny everything, dismiss the letter as nonsense, and hope Lady Isadora gives up, or he can acknowledge the bond and face the consequences. What consequences? War, assassination attempts, rebellion. Kale's voice was calm, clinical. The nobles will not accept a commoner Luna. They will fight it with everything they have. Some will try to kill you, others will try to use you. The king's enemies will see you as the ultimate weapon against him. Alina sat in stunned silence. She had wanted to matter once. She had wanted to be more than a forgotten village girl. But this was a nightmare. What do I want? She asked, her voice small. That, child, is the most important question of all. The king will not force this bond. If you want to walk away, he will find a way to free you, to send you somewhere safe where you can live out your life in peace. He will grieve, but he will let you go. And if I stay, then you become the most powerful woman in the kingdom, and the most hunted. Kale leaned forward. Think carefully, Alina. Your answer will determine not just your fate, but the fate of everyone in this palace, including the king. Alina closed her eyes. She thought of Ethan, of his gentle hands and warm smile. She thought of the cottage they would never share, the children they would never have. She thought of his mother's cruelty, the bruise on her cheek, the 40 silver pieces that had bought her life. And she thought of silver eyes in a steam-filled room, of a bond that had refused to die, of a man who had hidden her to keep her safe, who had endured 3 weeks of silence rather than put her in danger. Her wolf howled inside her, wild and certain. She opened her eyes. "I want to see him." Chaol studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." 10 Pete. The king's private chambers were nothing like Alina had imagined. She had expected grandeur, gilded furniture, towering ceilings, servants bowing and scraping. Instead, she found a modest sitting room with worn leather chairs, shelves overflowing with books, and a fire that crackled warmly in the hearth. It looked like a place where a man actually lived, not a throne room where a king performed. And in the center of it all, standing with his back to her, was the Alpha King. He turned when she entered, and the breath left Alina's body in a rush. He was even...
The attack came at dawn. Alina awoke to the clash of steel and the roar of wolves. Brandon was already on his feet, pulling on his tunic, his silver eyes blazing. "Stay here," he commanded. "No." He froze, staring at her. "I'm your mate," Alina said, rising from the bed. "Where you go, I go." Something fierce and proud flashed in his eyes. He grabbed her hand, and together they ran. The courtyard was chaos. Dozens of rebels fought against the palace guard, and at the center, standing atop the fountain like a general commanding her army, was Lady Isildur. "Kill the king," she shrieked. "Kill his whore. Let none survive." Brandon shifted mid-stride, his massive black wolf tearing into the nearest attackers. Alina should have been afraid. She should have run. Instead, she felt her wolf rise. For the first time since Ethan's death, she shifted. Her silver fur caught the dawn light as she launched herself at the rebels, fighting beside her mate. It ended quickly. The rebels were outmatched. Lady Isildur was dragged from the fountain, her dress torn, her eyes wild with hatred. "You took everything from me," she screamed at Alina. "My son, my dignity, and now you take the throne?" Alina shifted back, standing naked and unashamed before the assembled court. Brandon wrapped his cloak around her shoulders. "I took nothing," Alina said calmly. "You threw it all away." Lady Isildur spat at her feet. Brandon's voice cut through the morning air like ice. "For treason against the crown, I sentence you to life in the dungeons. Take her away." 1 month later, Alina stood in the great hall of the palace, dressed in white silk, a crown of moonlight resting on her brow. Before her knelt the entire kingdom, nobles and commoners, wolves and humans. Behind her stood Brandon, his hands on her shoulders, his pride radiating through their bond. "I present to you," Chaol announced to the crowd, "Alina of House Valthera, Luna of the Realm, mate to the Alpha King." The hall erupted in cheers. Alina looked out at the sea of faces and felt Brandon's lips brush her ear. "Happy?" he whispered. She turned, smiling, and kissed him before the entire kingdom. Ecstatic. That night in their chambers, Alina stood before the window, watching the stars. "I still think about him," she admitted quietly. "Ethan. Some days it hurts." Brandon came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "It will always hurt. Grief doesn't disappear." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "But it makes room for new love, new joy, new memories." Alina leaned back against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you for waiting for me. Thank you for finding me. I love you, Alina, not despite your past, because of it, because you survived, because you're here, because you're mine." She smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I love you too, Brandon, my king, my mate, my home." He kissed her softly, tenderly, as the stars watched over them. In the dungeons below, Lady Isildur sat in the darkness, alone with her regrets. And in the palace above, the new Luna slept peacefully in her mate's arms, finally at peace. The moon goddess, it seemed, knew exactly what she was doing after all.